The last Romulan to ever fight a human screamed in terror as his warship exploded around him, torn apart by the primitive kinetic weapons of a vastly inferior human vessel. Sub-Admiral Belos, pride of the Romulan Star Navy, had led a fleet of 10 cutting-edge warships to subdue a remote human colony on the frontier. The colony only had a single small frigate defending it, commanded by one Captain Derek Wilson. Belos outgunned him 10-1 with faster, stronger, more advanced ships. The battle should have been over in seconds. But now, 8 Romulan ships drifted as helpless hulks in space, the other 2 reduced to glowing debris fields. Belos punched the sparking ruin of his command console in rage and disbelief. How? How had the humans done this with their piece of junk frigate and its paltry 5 laser cannons? Proximity alerts blared, boarders inbound. Belos snarled. He stormed toward the airlock, disruptor pistol in hand. He would personally lead the defense against the pesky human boarding party. It was time to show them the true might of the Romulan race and the folly of standing against the Star Empire. But 20 minutes later, Belos found himself on his knees, hands clasped behind his head, while a dozen human Marines aimed weapons at him. Captain Derek Wilson stood before him, a small smirk on his face. The human had stormed the bridge, shot Belos's bodyguards, and was now demanding the Romulans' surrender. "I'd rather die than be your prisoner," Belos spat. "So be it," Wilson shrugged, raising his plasma rifle. "I'll give you 5 seconds to reconsider. 1. A cold sweat broke out on Belos's neck. This couldn't be happening. Romulans never surrendered. 2. 3. But staring down the barrel of Wilson's gun, Belos felt his resolve crumbling. 4. "Wait!" Belos cried. "I yield! I yield!" Wilson lowered his weapon, satisfied. He knew this was just the beginning. Billions of Romulans were still out there, all hell-bent on conquering and enslaving humanity. But after seeing what Captain Wilson's small ship did to Belos's fleet today, after witnessing firsthand the resourcefulness, determination, and sheer grit that drove humans to accomplish the impossible, Belos couldn't help but shudder at what would happen when the full might of humanity was unleashed upon the galaxy. Maybe, the Romulan thought as human Marines dragged him away in chains, we made a grave mistake picking a fight with these humans. Maybe this is a war we will come to regret. Derek Wilson marched down the corridor of his battered frigate, his boots clanging on the metal deck plates. The captured Romulan prisoners were secured in the brig, and his ship was limping back to Earth for repairs and to deliver the valuable intel extracted from Sub-Admiral Belos. Suddenly, the comm panel on the wall crackled to life. "Captain Wilson to the bridge! Urgent distress call from Arcadia Colony!" Derek sprinted the rest of the way, bursting onto the bridge. "Report!" he barked. His communications officer, Lieutenant Emily Chen, looked up from her console, eyes wide. "Sir, Arcadia Colony is under heavy attack by a Romulan warship. They're requesting immediate assistance." Derek hardened his eyes. Arcadia was a small frontier outpost with minimal defenses. They wouldn't stand a chance against a Romulan assault. But his own ship was badly damaged, and he had a hold full of enemy prisoners. Engaging the Romulans now would be beyond risky. He glanced at his first officer, Commander Jack Hayes. The man gave a slight nod, his expression grim but determined. Derek turned back to Emily. "Set a course for Arcadia, maximum speed, and send a message to the colony. Tell them to hold on. We're on our way." As the ship changed course, Derek strode over to the tactical station. "What's our status, weapons and shields?" The tactical officer, a burly man named Mikhail, shook his head. "Shields are at 30%, Captain, and we're down to 2 operational laser cannons." Derek cursed under his breath. They'd be going into this fight with one hand tied behind their back. But what choice did he have? He couldn't abandon the colony. He tapped the ship-wide comm. "All hands. This is the captain. We're responding to a distress call from Arcadia Colony, currently under Romulan attack. I won't lie to you. We're hurt, and this won't be easy. But there are thousands of innocent lives at stake, and we're the only ones who can help. So man your stations, check your gear. We'll be entering enemy fire in 30 minutes. Wilson out." The bridge was silent for a heartbeat, the crew absorbing the weight of their captain's words. Then, as one, they bent to their duties with renewed focus and tenacity. They had a colony to save. 30 minutes later, Derek's ship dropped out of warp speed at the edge of the Arcadia system. The scene that greeted them was one of utter chaos. The colony hung vulnerable in space, its meager defenses flaring and winking out under a relentless barrage of plasma fire from the looming Romulan warship. Derek wasted no time. "Mikhail, target their shield generators and weapons arrays. Fire as soon as we're in range." He turned to his helmsman. "Bring us in hard and fast. Use the planet's gravity well to slingshot us around. Keep us out of their firing solution." The human frigate surged forward, racing toward the Romulan ship like David charging Goliath. Disruptor bolts lashed out towards them, but the helmsman jinked and weaved, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire. "Their shield frequencies, Captain," Emily called out. "Belos intel is good. I'm feeding the data to tactical now." Mikhail grinned fiercely as his targeting computer lit up with new information. "I've got a lock. Firing!" The frigate's laser cannons thrummed, spewing crimson beams at the Romulan ship. The enemy's shields sparked and flickered, then died under the precise onslaught. Secondary explosions blossomed along the warship's hull as its weapon emplacements detonated. A ragged cheer went up on the bridge. Against all challenges, they'd done it. The Romulan ship was dead in space. But the celebration was short-lived. Alarms blared as internal sensors tripped. "Captain," Mikhail yelled, "we have boarders in the brig. The Romulan prisoners have escaped." Derek was already moving, drawing his sidearm and sprinting for the door. "Jack, with me. Mikhail, the bridge is yours. Keep our guys safe." He and Jack pounded down the corridor, a security team falling in behind them. They could hear the sounds of combat ahead, the sharp bark of disruptor fire, and the screams of the dying. They reached the brig to find a scene of utter pandemonium. Romulan warriors, led by a massive, snarling brute, were locked in vicious hand-to-hand combat with the human guards. Bodies already littered the floor, and the air reeked of ozone and blood. "Take them down!" Derek roared, opening fire. Jack and the security team surged forward, engaging the Romulans with grim fury. Derek fought his way towards the leader, a mountain of corded muscle armed with a wicked disruptor bayonet. The Romulans saw him coming and grinned, baring sharpened teeth. "I am Trachis," he snarled, "and I will feast on your heart, human." They crashed together like two titans, trading blows that would have felled a lesser being. Derek felt ribs crack under the Romulan's hammer blows, but he gave as good as he got, his knuckles splitting on the alien's stony flesh. They grappled and strained, smashing against bulkheads, grunting with effort and pain. But for all his size and strength, Trachis began to flag against the human's relentless assault. Derek pressed his advantage, raining down blows, his vision red with blood and rage. With a final titanic effort, he wrapped his hands around the Romulan's throat and squeezed with all his might. Trachis' eyes bulged, his struggles weakening. Then, with a sickening crunch, the alien went limp. Derek staggered back, chest heaving. Around him, the fight was winding down as Jack and the security team mopped up the last of the Romulans. "Bridge!" Derek croaked into his comm. "Status report." Mikhail's voice came back, tired but triumphant. "The Romulan ship has been destroyed, Captain. Arcadia colony is safe. We're standing by to render assistance." Derek slumped against the wall, exhaustion and relief washing over him. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, outgunned and on the ropes, they'd saved the colony and defeated the Romulans. It was a victory that would be remembered, he knew, a tale whispered in the darkest corners of the Romulan Empire as a dire warning. Beware the humans. Beware their wrath. Hours later, as the battered human frigate limped into orbit around Arcadia, Derek stood on the bridge, watching as shuttles ferried medical teams and supplies to the stricken colony. They were hailing him as a hero down there, the man who'd saved them from certain doom. But Derek took no pleasure in the accolades. This was just one battle in a much larger war, a war for the very survival of his species, and it was a war he intended to win, whatever it takes. He turned to Jack. Set course for Earth, best possible speed, and get me a direct line to Starfleet Command. His eyes hardened. It's time we take this fight to the Romulans. Light years away, in the vaulted chambers of the Romulan High Command, a pall of stunned disbelief hung over the gathered leaders as they digested the reports from the front lines. 2 ships lost. 2 hardened commanders defeated. All at the hands of a single, stubborn human. Whispered conversations arose, fragmented and tense. Had they underestimated these upstart humans? Were the promises of an easy conquest nothing more than the delusions of fools? One grizzled general, his face lined with old scars, slammed an armored fist on the table. "Enough," he snarled. "If the humans want to fight, then by the stars we'll give them one. We'll drown them in their own blood and plant our flag on the ashes of their worlds." Mutters of assent rolled through the chamber. These were not the empty boasts of a crumbling empire, but the deadly promise of a warrior race too proud to bow, too strong to break. The Romulans would unleash the full might of their vast armada, and the galaxy would tremble before their fury. And if warriors like Derek Wilson stood in their way, then they would fall, like so many others before them, for the glory of the Romulan Empire, for the conquest of all. The news of Captain Derek Wilson's victories spread like wildfire through Romulan space. In the opulent chambers of the Romulan High Command, Supreme Leader Xenath paced back and forth, his face etched with lines of worry and rage. "This human," Xenath snarled, smacking his fist on a holographic display of Derek's exploits. "He makes fools of us all." The gathered Romulan officials shifted uneasily, none daring to speak. Xenath's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the room. "No more," he declared. "I will oversee this invasion personally." Xenath tapped a control panel, and a towering figure materialized in the center of the chamber. "Commander Kraxus," Xenath addressed the hologram. "You will hunt down this Derek Wilson and eliminate him. Bring me his head." Kraxus, his face a mass of scars and cybernetic implants, nodded grimly. "It will be done, Supreme Leader." Across the galaxy, Derek Wilson stood on the bridge of his newly repaired frigate, studying a tactical display. A young ensign approached, datapad in hand. "Captain," she said, "new orders from Starfleet Command." Derek took the pad, his eyes widening as he read. "We're to escort a convoy?" he muttered. "With experimental weapons tech?" "Yes, sir," the ensign replied. "Earth's top minds are on board. They say these new weapons could turn the tide of the war." Derek nodded, his mind already formulating strategies. "Alert the fleet. We move out in 1 hour." The convoy set out, a ragtag assemblage of freighters and science vessels, surrounded by Derek's protective fleet. For 2 days, they traveled unmolested through the inky void of space. On the 3rd day, alarms blared across Derek's ship. "Multiple contacts!" his tactical officer shouted. "Romulan signatures!" Derek's hands flew across his command console. "Battle stations! All ships! Defensive formation Delta!" A swarm of Romulan warships dropped out of warp, their disruptors already firing. At their head was a monstrous dreadnought, easily twice the size of Derek's flagship. "Evasive maneuvers!" Derek barked. "Convoy ships, make for the jump point!" The space around them erupted into chaos. Romulan disruptor beams lanced out, met by the desperate return fire of Derek's outnumbered fleet. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "the enemy commander is hailing us." The scarred visage of Commander Kraxus filled the view screen. "Captain Wilson," he growled, "your legend ends here." Derek's ship rocked as a volley of torpedoes slammed into their shields. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks and crewmen cried out in pain. "Shields at 30%, someone shouted. "We can't take much more of this." Derek gritted his teeth. "All hands, abandon ship," he ordered. "Get to the escape pods. I'll buy you time." As his crew evacuated, Derek took manual control of the weapons. With expert precision, he targeted Kraxus's flagship, scoring several direct hits. The 2 ships closed on each other, trading fire at point-blank range. Derek's frigate was falling apart around him, but he refused to give up. "One last trick," he muttered, plotting a collision course. Derek's crippled ship slammed into Craxus's dreadnought. The impact sent Derek flying, his head cracking against a bulkhead. Through blurry vision, he saw the hull beginning to buckle. Stumbling to an escape pod, Derek launched himself into space moments before both ships were consumed in a massive fireball. Drifting in his pod, Derek felt consciousness slipping away. His last thought before blackness took him was of Earth and the hope that his sacrifice had been enough. An indeterminate time later, Derek awoke to the hiss of a med scanner. He blinked, confused to find himself in what looked like a Romulan medbay. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Captain," a familiar voice said. Derek turned his head to see Sub-Admiral Bellows standing over him, a wry smile on his face. "You?" Derek croaked. "But how?" Bellows shrugged. "Let's just say I've had a change of heart about this war. When I saw your pod, I couldn't leave you to die." Derek tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "Where are we?" "On a stolen scout ship," Bellows replied, "but we may not be alone for long." A proximity alarm began to wail. On a nearby screen, Derek saw a damaged Romulan warship limping through space. Bellows and Derek shared a look. Without a word, they moved to the bridge, a plan already forming between them. "I know the access codes," Bellows said, his fingers dancing across the control panel. Derek nodded, studying the warship's layout. "And I know how to take it." Together they set course for the damaged ship, an unlikely alliance forged in the crucible of war. As they closed in on their target, both human and Romulan knew that the real battle was just beginning. Derek and Bellows stood side by side on the bridge of the captured Romulan warship, an uneasy alliance forged in the crucible of their shared near-death experience. The stars streaked by as they set course to rendezvous with the remaining human fleet. "Your tactics were impressive," Bellows grudgingly admitted, breaking the tense silence. "Perhaps there is more to humans than I first believed." Derek nodded, a ghost of a smile playing across his face. "And you've shown me that not all Romulans are the bloodthirsty conquerors we've been led to believe." Their moment of understanding was shattered by a sudden burst of static from the communications array. A frantic voice cut through the interference. "This is Outpost Sigma. We are under attack. Any Allied ships in range, please respond." Derek's head snapped towards the source of the transmission, his lips pursed. "We have to help them." Bellows frowned, his tactical mind already calculating the risks. "It could be a trap. We should continue to the rendezvous point." "Those are my people," Derek countered, his voice steely. "I won't abandon them." After a tense moment, Bellows nodded reluctantly. "Very well, but we go in carefully." They dropped out of warp near the beleaguered outpost, immediately spotting the source of the distress call. A small contingent of Romulan ships, their hulls adorned with mercenary markings, had the human facility surrounded. "Scarax," Bellows spat the name like a curse. "A warlord with no honor." Derek's mind raced, formulating a plan. "We'll use this ship's Romulan transponder codes. With luck, they won't realize we're not friendlies until it's too late." They approached the outpost, tension thick on the bridge. As they neared weapons range, Derek gave the order, "Now!" The captured warship's disruptors lashed out, catching Scarax's forces completely off guard. Two of the mercenary vessels erupted in flames before they could even raise shields. "All hands, prepare for boarding action," Derek barked into the ship-wide comm. He turned to Bellows. "Ready to remind these bastards what real warriors look like?" Bellows grinned fiercely, drawing his disruptor pistol. "Lead the way, human." They materialized inside the outpost amid chaos and carnage. Human defenders and Romulan mercenaries were locked in vicious close-quarters combat. Derek and Bellows waded into the fray, their unlikely alliance put to the ultimate test. Derek's fists and feet were a blur as he engaged multiple opponents, his strength and speed enhanced by the countless hours of training and real combat experience. Beside him, Bellows moved with predatory grace, his disruptor cutting down foes with surgical precision. As they fought their way deeper into the facility, Derek caught sight of a towering Romulan figure, Scarax himself. The warlord's face twisted in a snarl of recognition. "Wilson!" Scarax roared, charging forward with a wicked-looking blade. Derek met the charge head-on, narrowly avoiding a slash that would have opened his throat. They traded blows at a furious pace, neither able to gain a clear advantage. Scarax feinted left, then brought his blade arcing down in a killing stroke. Derek, caught off balance, knew he couldn't dodge in time. Suddenly, Belos was there, intercepting the blow. The sub-admiral cried out in pain as Scarax's weapon bit deep into his shoulder. "Belos!" Derek shouted, anguish and fury warring in his voice. With Scarax momentarily distracted, Derek seized the opening. He unleashed a flurry of strikes, driving the warlord back. Scarax's superior reach kept Derek at bay, but the human's relentless assault left no room for counterattack. Finally, Derek saw his chance. He ducked under a wild swing and surged forward, tackling Scarax to the ground. They grappled furiously, rolling across the blood-slicked floor. With a roar of effort, Derek managed to pin Scarax's weapon arm. He rained down blows with his free hand, each impact a thunderclap of flesh on flesh. Scarax's struggles weakened, then ceased altogether. Panting heavily, Derek staggered to his feet. Around him, the sounds of battle were fading as the last of the mercenaries were subdued or fled. He rushed to where Belos lay, blood pooling beneath him. Derek frantically applied pressure to the wound, barking orders for a medic. "Hold on," he urged his unlikely ally. "Just hold on." Belos coughed weakly, his eyes struggling to focus on Derek's face. "Listen to me," he rasped. "What we've done here, it makes us both targets now. My people, they'll never accept this alliance." "We'll figure something out," Derek insisted, but doubt gnawed at him. "No," Belos shook his head. "You must go. Rejoin your fleet. Leave me before it's too late for both of us." Derek's mind reeled, the weight of the decision crushing down on him. Stay with Belos and risk everything, or abandon his newfound ally to an uncertain fate. As the liberated outpost defenders gathered around, hailing him as their savior, Derek felt no joy in the victory. There was only the terrible knowledge that his next choice could alter the course of the entire war. His eyes met Belos's, and in that moment, Derek knew what he had to do. Derek stared at Belos, his mind racing. The Romulans' labored breathing filled the air, each rasp a reminder of the sacrifice made in battle. Derek's fingers tightened on the edge of the medical bed. "I can't leave you," he said, his voice low and firm. Derek turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Yara Chen. "Prep the captured warship. We're going in." Chen's eyes widened. "Sir, that's suicide. The Romulan homeworld is exactly where we need to go." Derek cut her off. "Assemble a team, volunteers only." Hours later, Derek stood on the bridge of the stolen Romulan vessel. 5 of his best officers manned the stations, their human features masked by shimmering holographic disguises. "Approaching Romulan space," Ensign Torres reported from Tactical. "Border patrols dead ahead." Derek leaned forward in the command chair. "Transmit the codes Belos gave us. Nice and easy." The ship glided past the border outposts. No alarms sounded, no weapons locked on. Derek allowed himself a small breath of relief. "We're in," he said. "Now comes the hard part." They navigated a treacherous asteroid field, relying on Belos's intel to avoid detection grids and automated defenses. Twice, they nearly collided with massive chunks of space rock. Derek's hands flew over the controls, guiding them through with preternatural skill. As they approached the Romulan homeworld, a swarm of ships filled the view screen. Derek's heart pounded. One slip, one hint of their true identity, and they'd be atomized in seconds. "Steady," he murmured. "Maintain course." Somehow, they slipped through. The ship entered the planet's atmosphere, and Derek felt a bead of sweat trickle down his spine. They landed near a stark mountain range. In the distance, a fortified compound rose from the rocky terrain. Derek turned to his team. Remember, we're Romulan Special Forces. Act like it. Keep comm chatter to a minimum. They marched into the facility, Derek's eyes darting left and right behind his holographic mask. A Romulan officer approached, datapad in hand. Your authorization? He demanded. Derek handed over a code cylinder, praying the forged credentials would hold up. The officer studied it, frowning. Derek's hand inched toward his concealed weapon. The Romulan nodded curtly. Proceed. They found Belos in a secure medical wing, barely conscious. As Derek's team moved to extract him, alarms blared. Their luck had run out. We've been made, Chen shouted, drawing her disruptor. The air filled with weapons fire. Derek ducked behind a console, returning fire at the surging Romulan guards. He saw Chen take a hit to the shoulder, crying out in pain. Fall back, Derek ordered. Torres, clear us a path. They fought their way back to the ship, Belos slung between two officers. The Romulans stirred, mumbling incoherently. As they lifted off, a squadron of interceptors rose to meet them. Derek's hands flew over the controls, executing evasive maneuvers. They're closing fast, Torres warned. Derek gritted his teeth, dropping holographic disguise. Now! The ship's exterior shimmered, revealing its true human markings. The pursuing Romulans hesitated, clearly confused by the sudden change. They think we're pirates, Derek explained. It buys us time. They punched through the atmosphere, leaving the befuddled Romulan forces behind. Derek plotted a course for the rendezvous point, his heart still racing. Days later, at a hidden human starbase, Derek stood outside the infirmary. Inside, doctors worked frantically to save Belos's life. An admiral approached, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Captain Wilson, he growled, you have a lot of explaining to do. Derek straightened his back. Sir, I take full responsibility for my actions. Do you have any idea what you've done? The admiral snapped. The diplomatic nightmare you've created? The risk to our entire war effort? Before Derek could respond, another voice cut in. He did what was right. Derek turned to see Captain Sarah Reeves, a decorated war hero, striding toward them. Wilson showed us what it means to be human, Reeves continued. Even in war, we don't abandon our allies. The admiral's face reddened. This isn't over, Wilson, he snarled, storming away. Reeves clapped Derek on the shoulder. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, but you've got supporters. This could change everything. As if to emphasize her point, a communique flashed on a nearby screen. Reports of dissent within Romulan ranks. Whispers of a potential peace faction forming. Derek's mind reeled. What had he set in motion? In a distant sector of space, Sub-Admiral Craxus received the news of Belos's rescue. His cybernetic eye glowed with barely contained rage as he turned to his second-in-command. Set course for Earth, he snarled. It's time to... The news of Derek Wilson's audacious rescue mission spread like wildfire across human space. On Earth, heated debates erupted in bars, homes, and government chambers alike. Wilson's a damn fool, growled Admiral Hawkins, pounding his fist on the conference table. He's jeopardized everything we fought for. Across the table, Captain Sarah Reeves leaned forward, her eyes blazing. With all due respect, sir, Wilson showed us what it means to be human. Even in war, we don't abandon our allies. The tension in the room was palpable as opinions clashed. Outside the military complex, crowds gathered, their voices rising in a cacophony of support and condemnation. Meanwhile, in the halls of Romulan power, the air crackled with barely contained fury. Commander Craxus stormed into the High Council chamber, his cybernetic eye glowing with rage. This human, this Derek Wilson, has made fools of us all, he roared. And what of Belos, a traitor, consorting with our enemies? The moderate voices that once counseled caution found themselves drowned out by Craxus's fiery rhetoric. One by one, the council members fell in line behind the hardliners' calls for vengeance. At the hidden human starbase, Derek stood by Belos's bedside. The Romulan's skin was ashen, but his eyes were clear as he gripped Derek's arm. You must leave, Belos urged, his voice hoarse. Craxus will stop at nothing to see us both dead. Derek shook his head, his lips pursed. You saved my life. I won't abandon you now. Alarms blared, cutting their conversation short. Derek sprinted to the command center where chaos reigned. Lieutenant Chen's face was pale as she reported, Sir, Romulan warships have breached our outer defenses. Derek's mind raced. Evacuate all non-essential personnel. Chen, get Bellows to a secure location. The rest of you, with me. They fought through the corridors of the starbase, disruptor fire sizzling past their heads. Derek's small team held their ground, using every trick and tactic at their disposal. They're pushing us back, shouted Ensign Torres, ducking behind a fallen support beam. Belos's voice crackled over the comm. Derek, listen carefully. The third corridor on your left. There's a hidden maintenance shaft. Use it to flank them. Following Belos's advice, Derek and his team turned the tables on their attackers. But for every Romulan they took down, 2 more seemed to appear. Just as hope began to fade, a familiar voice boomed through the station. This is Captain Jack Hayes of the Earth Defense Force. All hands, prepare for immediate extraction. Derek's heart soared as he saw Hayes' fleet engaging the Romulan ships through a viewport. Coordinated strikes, clearly guided by Belos's inside knowledge, tore through the enemy formation. In the chaos of the battle, Derek and Bellos managed to slip aboard Hayes' flagship. As they limped away from the devastated starbase, Derek clasped his old friend's shoulder. Jack, I can't thank you enough. Hayes' expression was grim. Save it, Derek. We're not out of this yet. In the ship's war room, Belos delivered the crushing news. Craxus plans to launch a full-scale invasion of human space. This attack was just the beginning. The weight of those words settled heavily on everyone present. All eyes turned to Derek, the tension in the room electric with anticipation. So, Derek said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. How do we stop them? Derek's eyes scanned the tactical display. His face hardened as he absorbed the gravity of Belos's words. The Romulan invasion force loomed like a tidal wave, poised to crash over human space. We can't wait for them to strike first, Derek declared, his voice cutting through the tense silence of the war room. We need to hit them where it hurts. Captain Hayes leaned forward, his weathered face etched with concern. What did you have in mind? Derek turned to Bellos. You mentioned a weakness in their supply lines. Tell us more. Bellos nodded, his fingers flying over a hollow display. A 3D map of Romulan space materialized, zooming in on a nondescript sector. Here, a remote supply depot, vital to their invasion plans. Its defenses have a blind spot, one I helped to design. Murmurs of skepticism rippled through the assembled officers. Admiral Zhao smacked his head on the table. This is madness. We should be fortifying our borders, not launching some half-cocked raid. Derek met the Admiral's glare. With respect, sir, if we wait, we're dead. This is our only shot. The room erupted into heated debate. Derek stood firm, countering each objection with cold logic and fiery tenacity. Slowly, the tide of opinion turned. Captain Hayes nodded, a gleam of admiration in his eyes. I'm with you, Derek. What's the plan? Hours later, Derek addressed his hand-picked strike team in the hangar bay. Each face before him was a study in grim willpower. This won't be easy, Derek said, his voice carrying to every corner of the bay. But every one of you is here because you're the best. We go in fast, we hit hard, and we don't stop until that depot is ours. The infiltration began under the cover of a stellar phenomenon, masking their approach. Belos's insider knowledge proved invaluable, guiding them through sensor gaps and patrol routes. As they neared the depot, Derek's pulse quickened. Prepare for insertion, he ordered. Their shuttle glided into a maintenance airlock, bypassing the main defenses. The team moved swiftly through the corridors, neutralizing Romulan guards with practiced efficiency. They reached the central control room, where Bellos hesitated. His former subordinates stared in shock at his human disguise. Traitor! One spat, reaching for his weapon. Bellos moved faster, stunning the Romulan. I'm sorry, he whispered, genuine pain in his eyes. The humans surged forward, securing the room. Derek accessed the main computer, initiating the shutdown sequence for the depot's defenses. Alarms blared. "We've got company!" Lieutenant Chen shouted from her position by the door. Disruptor fire filled the air as Romulan reinforcements poured in. Derek's team held their ground, the narrow corridors working to their advantage. A massive explosion rocked the station. Through the viewport, Derek saw a Romulan warship decloaking. His blood ran cold as he recognized the insignia. "Craxus," he growled. The Romulan commander's face appeared on the main screen, cybernetic eye glowing with hatred. "Did you think you could outwit me, human?" Derek raised his weapon. "Why don't you come find out?" The battle raged through the depot. Derek's team fought with desperate courage, but they were slowly pushed back. Suddenly, Craxus himself appeared, cutting down two Marines with brutal efficiency. Derek lunged forward, engaging the Romulan in close combat. Their struggle was fierce, a blur of strikes and counters. Derek felt his strength waning, but he refused to yield. With a final desperate surge, he disarmed Craxus and pinned him to the ground. The Romulan troops, seeing their leader defeated, faltered. Victory seemed within reach. Then came the crushing revelation. As they secured the depot, intelligence flooded in. This was no vital supply hub. It was a decoy. The real invasion force had used their distraction to disperse across human space, untraceable and unstoppable. Derek's face was ashen as he addressed the fleet. "Begin immediate evacuation of all human worlds. Captain Hayes, you'll coordinate the exodus to our fallback point." Hayes nodded grimly. "What about you?" Derek's eyes hardened. "I'm taking the fight to them. We're going to infiltrate the Romulan homeworld and capture Supreme Leader Xenath." Shocked silence greeted his words. Then Belos stepped forward. "I will go with you," he said simply. As the orders went out and panic spread across human space, Derek gathered his team. Each face before him showed fear, but also unwavering drive. "This may well be a one-way trip," Derek said softly, "but it's our last chance to save everything we hold dear." They boarded their ship, a specially modified stealth vessel. As they prepared to depart, Derek caught a glimpse of the evacuation beginning, countless ships fleeing into the void. He turned to his crew, his voice steady. "Let's remind the Romulans why they should have never underestimated humanity." The ship's engines flared to life, carrying them towards the heart of enemy territory, and humanity's last, desperate hope for survival. The stealth vessel cut through the void of space, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Romulan sensors. Inside the cramped cabin, Derek Wilson surveyed his elite strike team. Each face bore the weight of humanity's survival. "We're approaching the outer defense grid," Lieutenant Chen announced, her fingers dancing across the control panel. Derek nodded. "Prepare for atmospheric entry. Remember, we get one shot at this." The ship shuddered as it breached the Romulan homeworld's atmosphere. Derek felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as the drop pods deployed. His team plummeted towards the surface, the pod's heat shields glowing red-hot from the friction. With a bone-jarring impact, they landed. Derek's pod hissed open, and he emerged into the alien landscape. The air was thick and acrid, burning his lungs with each breath. "Alpha Team, move out," Derek ordered. "Beta Team, commence diversion." As Beta Team advanced towards the military installation, Derek led his group towards Xenath's citadel. The imposing structure loomed ahead, its twisted spires piercing the smog-choked sky. "There," Belos whispered, pointing to a narrow maintenance shaft. "That's our way in." They slipped inside, the darkness enveloping them. Derek's heart pounded as they navigated the labyrinthine passages. Every shadow held the potential for discovery. Suddenly alarms blared. The diversion had worked. "Now!" Derek shouted. They burst into the inner sanctum, catching the Romulan guards off guard. Disruptor fire filled the air as Derek's team moved with brutal efficiency. Bodies fell, the acrid smell of ozone mixing with the metallic tang of blood. Through the chaos, Derek spotted him. Supreme Leader Zenith stood at the far end of the chamber, his face a mask of cold fury. Derek charged forward, dodging energy blasts. Zenith met him halfway, his massive frame dwarfing the human captain. They clashed in a fury of blows, Derek's combat training barely keeping him alive against the Romulan's raw power. A vicious backhand sent Derek sprawling, his vision blurred as Zenith loomed over him, ready to deliver the killing blow. "Derek!" Belos's voice cut through the haze. The Romulan defector tackled Zenith, buying Derek precious seconds to recover. Together, they grappled with the Supreme Leader, finally subduing him with a well-placed stun blast. "We've got him," Derek panted. "Fall back to the extraction point." They fought their way back through the citadel, Zenith's unconscious form slung between them. Outside, the sky was alive with weapons fire as Beta Team drew off the bulk of the Romulan forces. Derek's communicator crackled. "Captain, we're pinned down." It was Lieutenant Chen, her voice tight with pain. "We can't hold much longer." "Hold your position," Derek ordered. "We're almost there." They pressed on, each step bringing them closer to escape. But as they neared the shuttle, a familiar figure blocked their path. Kraxus stood before them, his cybernetic eye glowing with hatred. In his hands, he wielded an ancient Romulan warblade. "Wilson," he snarled, "did you think you could steal our leader and escape?" Derek pushed Zenith towards Belos. "Get him to the shuttle, I'll handle this." Kraxus lunged forward, the blade singing through the air. Derek barely managed to parry with his own weapon, the impact sending shockwaves up his arm. They dueled across the war-torn landscape, each blow potentially fatal. Derek felt his strength waning, but he refused to yield. The fate of humanity hung on this moment. With the audacious attempt, Derek feinted left, then struck. His blade found its mark, piercing Kraxus's chest. The Romulan commander's eyes widened in shock. "How?" he gasped before collapsing. Derek turned to see Belos staggering towards the shuttle, supporting the still unconscious Zenith. Relief flooded through him. Then Kraxus, with his dying breath, lashed out. His blade caught Belos in the back, sending him crashing to the ground. "Belos!" Derek cried out. He rushed to his fallen friend, but the sound of approaching Romulan reinforcements filled the air. Derek looked from Belos to the shuttle, anguish tearing at his heart. "Go," Belos whispered, his voice weak. "Save our people." With a final pained glance, Derek grabbed Zenith and sprinted for the shuttle. The engines roared to life as they lifted off, leaving Belos behind on the hostile world. The extraction craft punched through the atmosphere, rejoining the human fleet at the rendezvous point. As news of their success spread, a cautious hope began to bloom. But for Derek, the victory felt hollow. He stared out at the stars, his thoughts with the friend he'd been forced to abandon. The war was just the beginning, and the cost had already been too high. The human flagship's war room buzzed with tension as Derek Wilson stood before the assembled leaders. Holographic displays flickered, showing the looming Romulan armada poised to strike. "We've captured Zenith, but his forces remain intact," Derek said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "We have hours at most before they launch their final assault." Admiral Zhao thumped his hand on the table. "Execute the bastard! Show those pointy-eared devils what happens when they cross humanity." Captain Hayes shook her head. "No, we should use him as leverage. Sue for peace while we still can." The room erupted into heated arguments. Derek raised his hand, silencing the cacophony. "Neither option saves us. I have a plan, but it's risky." He activated a holographic display of the Romulan communication network. "We use Zenith's command codes to infiltrate their comms. Then, we send false orders, scattering their fleet across the galaxy." Stunned silence fell over the room. Admiral Zhao's eyes narrowed. "And how do you propose we get those codes?" Derek's lips pursed. Belos provided them, along with crucial intel on Romulan protocols. "Belos?" Captain Hayes leaned forward. "But he—" A junior officer burst into the room. Sir, a Romulan shuttle just breached our perimeter. Derek's heart raced as he sprinted to the hangar bay. The shuttle's hatch opened with a hiss, revealing Belos. The Romulan defector stumbled out, clutching a bleeding wound in his side. Derek, Belos gasped, collapsing into the human's arms. I had to warn you. The invasion, it's coming sooner than we thought. Medics rushed forward, but Belos waved them away. No time. Listen carefully. He pulled Derek close, whispering a string of codes and protocols. With a final shuddering breath, Belos went still. Derek closed his friend's eyes, his purpose hardening. Back in the war room, Derek outlined his audacious plan. We'll need perfect coordination. Lieutenant Chen, you'll lead the comm infiltration team. Captain Hayes, your ships will form our defensive screen. He turned to a grizzled Marine. Sergeant Cooper, ready your strike teams. Once the Romulan fleet is scattered, you'll board and neutralize key command ships. As the officers dispersed to their stations, Derek activated the fleet-wide comm. The faces of countless human pilots and crew members appeared on screens throughout the assembled ships. This is Captain Derek Wilson, he began, his voice steady. In mere hours, the Romulans will launch an attack that could end humanity. But we have an opportunity, a chance to turn their strength against them. He paused, meeting the gaze of each person on the screen. I won't lie. This mission is dangerous, and success is far from certain. But throughout this war, humanity has defied the odds time and time again. Today, we do so one last time. Cheers erupted across the comm channels. Derek nodded to Lieutenant Chen. Begin the infiltration. Chen's fingers flew across her console, inputting the codes Belos had provided. Tense seconds ticked by as they waited for confirmation. We're in, Chen exclaimed. Transmitting false orders now. On the tactical display, the massive Romulan fleet began to fracture. Ships peeled off in different directions, leaving gaps in their formation. All ships prepare to engage, Derek ordered. Strike teams, stand by for boarding actions. The human fleet surged forward, catching the disorganized Romulans off guard. Explosions blossomed in the void as the first salvos found their marks. Derek gripped the arms of his command chair as his ship shuddered under enemy fire. Press the attack. We can't give them time to regroup. As the battle raged across multiple fronts, Derek knew the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The gambit had begun, and there was no turning back.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.